All right, so we are gonna have a great discussion about NFTs. Thank you, Vlad, for joining me on this actually happy hour. Cheers!
Cheers, Fanny. Thank you so much for having me.
Not alcohol. This is not alcohol, we should say, for the record.
This is alcohol-free bourbon.
Exactly. And frosé. Is that the thing still? All right. Now, joke aside, thank you so much for joining us. We've been discussing a lot of things with you and CADAF. You've been supporting from the beginning, so it's always great. And as you were saying, it's like, you know, we're like friends, so it's like having a small discussions about NFT and how you know, we arrived at that like use of NFTs and defining what NFTs is first, and then how it's used for crypto art, and maybe talking about how we can actually use it for other types of digital arts. So I think the first point I would say is that you have a very interesting background. I was telling you, I don't know if many people know everything you're involved in. So I would love for you to tell us more about how you came to the blockchain world and the art world. So take your time. It's a very good story. So it's not a one-word answer.
Yeah, let me just take a big old sip so I can jump right into it.
Yes.
But before I do get into it, I do want to take the time to consider, you mentioned I've been involved and supporting CADAF since the beginning, and it's a funny thing to say since the beginning, because the beginning was a year and a half ago that I met you and Elena.
Yeah, it's true.
Not when CADAF began, but when I sort of met you guys and learned about what CADAF hoped to be. And in the greater scheme of things, a year and a half is such a short amount of time. Maybe in the blockchain world, it's a lot longer. But this is a good moment at CADAF Digital, or Virtual CADAF, to appreciate just how much has changed in a year and a half. This is the third CADAF. So first of all, congratulations, and so well done for you guys to adapt everything going on. And how CADAF has taken us to a totally new kind of event in New York, to something that's totally different in Miami at Art Basel, and now here. And in that same year and a half, so much has changed, even for NFTs, even for digital art. And you guys have been at the forefront of it. So I'm super happy to be a part of it again, supporting again, and chatting with you in this interview. So thank you.
No, thanks for being a great support, and I know we're going to define NFTs and all these terms, like, so nobody worries about the jargon we're using, but it's a very interesting mix of I think when we started with CADAF, one fun story that I say sometimes is that and I don't know if you know that, but CADAF, like the C of CADAF at the beginning, was crypto.
Is that right?
Yes, it was not contemporary. It was crypto, and you know, it was at the beginning where like the crypto art and blockchain was like super hype, like everywhere, like everything that we were doing even before the first art fair was blockchain related. And then we hit the crypto winter where everything like just like became a little wishy-washy. We started like talking to bigger sponsors as well. Like I always remember like Bank of America, we talked to someone there and they're like, but how do you expect us to support something that starts with crypto? And we're like, right. Oh, true. We're like, okay, see current, contemporary. Okay. So that, but that was a great thing, because it really allowed us to focus on many different types of things. So I think this was like bottom line, a good decision, which we did not, you know, like thought about like originally, but it was a great decision. So, but yeah, so we originally met you from the blockchain side, and for CADAF, the first CADAF, you actually managed our ticketing with Blockparty.
That's right. And that's a perfect segue to me actually answering your question of how Blockparty came to be very mindful of the digital art space. So you did mention that I came into the blockchain world from the fine art world. And
tell us more, because I didn't really say anything.
well,
I wanted you to say it.
well, there's something really cool. One of the things that I really appreciate about the blockchain space in general is that very few people, and when I say very few people, I mean basically the youngest segment of the blockchain crowd is really native to the blockchain space, right?
Mm-hmm.
Most people, an overwhelming majority of folks in the blockchain space aren't native blockchain people. They've come in from different industries and bring different sets of experiences. And when I really got myself involved full time in the art space, I only really met maybe a handful of people that came in from the same fine art path,
Yeah.
I suppose. So one of the really wonderful things about meeting you and Elena and Andrea and everyone is that, and really everyone in the crypto art space, right? Mm-hmm. So Judy and Dada and just everyone involved in it was so refreshing to me, because I found this whole community of people that came from the same places I did, and I felt right at home. From the time that I graduated college through about 2016, I was in the fine art space, and primarily I was running an investment fund for fine art. That's kind of a catch-all way of saying that the clients I had were looking to get into art, they weren't necessarily incumbent art collectors. They were interested in getting into art, and maybe they were coming from businesses that were more finance driven, or they were just starting to learn about collectorship. And if they weren't interested in learning about collectorship, I quickly got them in touch with somebody that would help them learn. What I sort of started doing was thinking about how art can be both something to collect and both something valuable because of the art, but also something where I can speak very freely with my client's financial advisor about where this fits into their portfolio. Now, that's certainly not a novel idea. I think art has been treated as an investment, if not explicitly, for a very long time. I think that I was hoping to do things a little bit differently and try things in a way that maybe hadn't been tried before. One of the first things that I did, for example, was I raised a fund and acquired a collection of photography and its copyrights, with the idea that the negatives of that photography archive and the vintage prints should be only exhibited in museums and should grow value over time, as all collectibles do. However, by owning the copyrights and controlling, let's say, how many prints were created and sort of supply relative to demand, we could think about the principal paid for the archive as a principal investment, with sales of prints as a, let's say, dividend almost. Mm-hmm. The longer I was in the art space, the more I realized and learned that you really can't think about it in terms of like financial words like principal and dividends and things like that. It doesn't really work.
So, like, because people don't understand it, or people don't react well to it?
I think people don't react well to it. Something I've thought for a while, and I've shared with you, is that, you know, a lot of people make the mistake of assuming that the art market is irrational or inefficient, and it's quite the opposite. And one of the things that the art market is very efficient at is sniffing out who is treating artwork as a promissory note. And so when you start really thinking about things like, oh, I'm going to make so many prints per year as a dividend, how are you making collectors feel? And that's when I learned very early on that art really is about collectorship. and it can be an investment, but thinking about it as true collectorship ends up powering the most important factor in the value of a piece of art after its initial sale, which is in the art business, we know that there's a difference between a good provenance and a bad provenance. So once an artwork has been finished and enters a collector's domain and a second collector and a third collector, et cetera, the story of where that painting goes becomes very important. And I spent a lot of time studying what one kind of provenance might impact a price versus a museum provenance. And it's very obvious that one adds more value than the other, but what about really quantifying that? And those are the things that I spent a long time studying. And it was wonderful. A lot of great experiences, a lot of great stories. I've gotten a chance to be around some of the most fantastic art. But I don't want to say it wasn't enough, but I think like everybody else that got into the blockchain space, whatever they were doing, you know, you read the white paper and then you buy your first Bitcoin and then you mine a little bit and then you go fully down the rabbit hole, and suddenly whatever was driving you to do whatever you were doing, you're spending suddenly more time with passion and headspace about your little side hobby, until eventually you've got to do your own flippening of what's your hobby and what do you do for work. But I fortunately did spend quite a bit of time, you know, buying and selling and being around these beautiful things like the Warhols, the Picassos, the Rothkos of the world, and getting to understand collectibles and collectorship at the highest level. And that really gave me a tremendous background to get into what's happening now with digital assets, and how digital assets are this like wonderful new technology, this wonderful new way of collecting, and yet the same principles are unchanged.
But wait a second, because you're skipping steps. So why not go from your art career to maybe an art and blockchain project? I mean, this is kind of where I end up being, like, you know, with Snark.art, Additional, like talking a lot with Dada. But you went more into the entertainment space with Blockparty, which was, like, correct me if I'm wrong, but it was a ticketing business at first, right?
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And well, I got to Blockparty by way of Galaxy. I started being around like those Galaxy happy hours. I was considering a good friend of mine, Michael Maloney, was at Galaxy, and he introduced me to Blockparty. And once I got to know this entertainment application, at that point, I was already several years down the rabbit hole about blockchain. And I thought, what a wonderful opportunity, what better opportunity than to present this complex new technology that not everybody fully understands, by folding it into a thing that everybody already does, which is go into events. What better way than music, sports, art events, things that people already do and already are exposed to technology. I mean, everybody that's, you know, outside of like Gen Z used paper tickets from cardstock for years and years and years, and then almost like this started printing out their tickets, and now they just flash their phone. These things that we already do have a unique way of making us use technology without even realizing we're using groundbreaking technology. Look at music festivals with RFID bands. You know, I thought it was a really wonderful opportunity. So I loved Blockparty. At the time, I was like everybody else in the art business that learned about blockchain. I was like, aha, this shall replace the catalog raisonné once and for all. And
I love the aha, because that's exactly like the sound that like everybody would make, like be like, oh. Or like the other sound they would make is like, ew, gross, when you talk about crypto kitties. That was like the two sounds. It's like the haha or ew. Two sounds.
But yeah, I mean, as an art person, like I thought through like, oh, a blockchain could replace the catalog raisonné. A blockchain could do X, Y, Z for the art world. But at the same time, the problems that, or the like no duh things that blockchain solves are problems that the art buyers have. And before you can reach the art buyers, you've got this technology has to really make an impact on the art business, on the business of galleries, on the business of auction houses, on the business of curators, on the business of so many things before you can get to making it more transparent to buy art. And
but what do you think so? Because sometimes we could argue, to be the devil's advocate, that the need of these come from the demand, right? And if the collector demands that like this is like blockchain certificate is part of his purchase at Christie's, at Sotheby's, then the auction houses is going to make it happen. It's, I don't know. It's just.
I think that's true, and yet, to devil's advocate, right back at you.
You can't be the devil's advocate back at the devil's advocate.
It's a hell of a courtroom.
That analyzed like the devil's advocate.
Well, okay. So we're both devils here.
To be the angel advocate, maybe you're back at the angel from the devil.
Let's go further with this metaphor. If you're playing devil's advocate, then I suppose. Anyway, let me.
Just answer the question. Just answer the question.
How many collector? Well, if the collector demands a digital certificate of authenticity that's issued from a decentralized autonomous organization that proves beyond a shadow of a doubt that this is a real asset, then we've now described a P2P certificate of authenticity system, and in which case, what do you need? All somebody needs to do is build a digital auction house, and then what do you need Sotheby's and Christie's for? Because
so fair enough. You're like, this is kind of maybe like the not the end goal, but like a peer-to-peer like system, but like to play with the current actors.
Well, like as an art person, right? I know that if I want to buy a piece of contemporary art that has a high rate of forgery, so let's say a Keith Haring, let's say a Salvador Dali. Well, Dali's not really contemporary, but let's say Dali's a bad example because you can get a Deschamps certificate. Let's use Keith Haring, right? Keith Haring, tons of forgeries out there, and or the Warhol paintings, the Basquiat paintings. The foundations don't really issue certificates of authenticity anymore. Right. So in a world that there's no certificate of authenticity that can be legally issued, we trust the Sotheby's and the Christie's of the world to do their homework, to do their sleuthing on knowing where the provenance is. And by buying the artwork from a major auction house, that's having your bill of sale from that auction house is a tacit sort of certificate of authenticity. I don't know, I can't dig up Keith from the grave and have him tell me this is real, but I bought it from Sotheby's or I bought it from Christie's, so it must be real. And that's a level of trust that, well, now we're getting to blockchain stuff, trust and trustless. To go back to your question, back in 2017, 2018, I got pitched a lot of art-related blockchain projects. The first one, as I usually tell you or Misha over a drink or Andre, is the first one that actually made sense to me was Snark Art. Because the Snark Art was, at the time, Blockparty was using ERC 721, which is an NFT as a ticket.
I have to buzz you. Technical term. What's an NFT? I will define it for you. You can have a sip. NFT stands for non-fungible token, which is a token that is actually unique. It is not like a fungible token, which is like a cryptocurrency where one Bitcoin is the same as another Bitcoin. Like a non-fungible token is by essence unique. So it's going to be like a non-fungible token 1, 2, 3, 4, and they're all different. And we can go into like the different types of non-fungible tokens, but I don't think we will go into ERC 721 or modified ERC 20. They're just different types of tokens. But That's why we always talk about non-fungible tokens or NFTs. Someone asked me if it stood for not for tourists once. And it's like, no, it's not that. So non-fungible token.
Or
that was my minute of definition.
Or a provably scarce digital collectible.
Yes.
Maybe.
That's a nice take on it. I like that one.
Thank you.
I already forgot it. Wait, repeat it. I have to write it down.
A provably scarce digital collectible.
Provably scarce digital collectible. I will reuse that.
Well, this is a CADAF fireside chat, so that's now property of CADAF.
It's a property of CADAF. True.
Trademark it.
Gosh, isn't everything open source now? Like, don't we have to not deal with trademarks and patents and
I kid.
Copyrights? We still need for artists to protect them, but that's a different topic for another panel or fireside chat next time.
When we were launching at Blockparty, we were thinking about non-fungible tokens as a way to differentiate seats in a venue. So at a GA venue, you can base tickets on ERC20 token because every GA ticket is like any other GA ticket. It's fungible. Yeah. However, when you're selling stadium tickets, a token representing section 10, row 5, seat 8 is very different than any other seat in the venue. Yeah. And
if you use a fungible token, you end up having everybody wanting to sit on your seat, which is not a good experience.
So I think it was a great use of the token standard, if not a great use of the blockchain system, because ticketing is ultimately centralized. Like the Yankees are selling their tickets. You're not like, that's, but the token standard made sense. And as I spent more and more time around sports, I spent more time around music, I saw that with my background in the art business, I saw that there was a much bigger business going on in events than ticketing. And and when I spoke to the other ticketing companies, Eventbrite, Live Nation, these, this wasn't some, the companies are described as like these like big, scary, like mean organizations, but they're actually populated by people that just grew up loving concerts and events. And something that I even joked around with those guys about was we used to all save our ticket stubs. After we used them to get into the show, they were mementos. They were collectibles.
Believe me, we have, I would not be able to get it right now, but we still have things from like, I don't want to say my age, but like almost pre-2000 that like is framed like with like the, different concerts.
Absolutely. And something that made me excited about digital collectibles as tickets was, hey, no, like we can keep digital collectibles in a wallet forever. we can even add the artwork that used to go on tickets into them. And suddenly I'd have to correct myself when I'm pitching ticketing because I felt myself pitching digital collectibles. At some point in 2018, Blockparty's PR firm, who was also representing Snark Art, called me up and was like, hey, you used to do art stuff. Come meet these guys that are tokenizing Eve Sussman's video art. And I was like, not another blockchain pitch. Okay, for art. Because at this point I'd heard so many that I was like, good luck, but not, I'm not getting involved. And when I met Misha and Andre, I was like, this is half baked, but the half that it's baked is really good. And it makes a lot of sense. And the other half that needs baking, like even if you said you had all the answers, I would believe you. So like, this is great. And I left that meeting Eve Sussman and meeting Andre and Misha, and it's kind of set me off on this collecting journey of digital art backed by NFTs, which eventually led me to CADAF, which eventually sort of led Blockparty to where it is now, where we decided going into 2020 that we would accelerate our plans to build a marketplace. It was always on Blockparty's roadmap to start off with a primary ticketing platform, which CADAF did use
Yeah.
in March. But the goal, the long-term goal, was to always have a fully integrated secondary market as well. Now, once you have a secondary market for digital assets, the thought that we had was, why limit ourselves to tickets? Why not build any digital asset, and or the ability to resell any digital asset? And we went into that journey towards the end of 2019. And by the time I went to CADAF in Miami in December, there was a lot of excitement at Blockparty about what could happen with digital assets, what we could do with digital assets if we build a marketplace for it. That, we're always going to have this like ticketing part of our business at heart. That's where it came from. But every one of the companies sort of drank the Kool-Aid and kind of caught on to what I'd been saying for a while, which is there's a massive opportunity here and we need to tap into it. Which brings us here into us being about a month away from launching our digital assets marketplace.
Yay! Congrats.
Thank you.
I'm very excited about that. But I do want to add something that I don't think we stressed enough for people who are unfamiliar with NFTs. And my personal fascination with NFTs is that it's a blank, empty shell. Like you can literally have, like, as you said, like a piece of music, like like a seat for a stadium that is associated to a piece of music and a piece of art. Like there can be so many layers of so many different assets within one NFT that I don't even think we're scratching like 1% of the surface and the potential uses of NFTs. And I totally can see how you went from ticketing to digital assets and art, because and right now, like I'm even discussing with another project on music as well, because it's you can make whatever you want of an NFT, I think. And I know it's a bit of a general and a catch-all comment, but it's important to note. I think everybody was looking into like this new token. It's not like a DeFi or like another blockchain, very complicated like concept just for the blockchain world. It is like something that touches every creative industry when you think about it.
I totally agree. And what is exciting about it is creating a new asset class. Mm-hmm. And I want to be careful when I say that, because just because you can tokenize anything doesn't mean everything needs to be tokenized, right? So when it comes to digital art, I just mentioned Eve Sussman with the Adams project at Snark Art. That video was made in the year 2000. It won the Whitney Biennale in 2000. So this was that was 10 years before a Bitcoin white paper was even written. So digital art was around long before blockchain was. And I don't think that when I say we're creating a whole new asset class, that I'm saying that like, well, let's just go and like tokenize everything and make a market out of it. But actually, why not? Specifically when it comes to digital art, I want to be careful that I'm quantifying and describing what I think the opportunity is as carefully as I can. Mm-hmm. So when I say that, I mean, we have this incumbent collectibles market that's somewhere in the neighborhood of $400 billion. But that comprises everything from cars to art to ephemera to, your grandpa's stamp collection. To zoom in a little bit and get into how much of the global collectibles market fine art defines, it's a smaller chunk, but it's still a huge market. You know, and we can't even quantify how huge of a market it is because we can't even account for all the private transactions that happen. What digital art has been around for a very long time, but I think with the advancement of blockchain as a technology that can help digital art, that gets interesting because what blockchain and non-fungible tokens can add to the conversation is a very elegant solution for differentiating between the original copy of an artwork or the original creation of an artwork and all subsequent copies of that artwork. Mm-hmm. And that's interesting. I would bring in a comparable example. So ebooks have been around for a lot longer than Kindles have, but everybody wasn't reading ebooks until a Kindle came out or until an iPad came out. So I think if you can compare digital art to ebooks, I think digital art is having its Kindle and iPad moment right now with what blockchain could potentially offer the space. I've certainly heard all the arguments from that probably you have from the incumbent art business. Well, why am I going to buy digital art when a bunch of copies can be made out of it? My answer is, I mean, if you have an unlimited budget and you're going to buy any Basquiat, wouldn't you want the Basquiat that gets the most like copies made of it on people's dorm rooms, of posters, on online, on Instagram? The more you have the original, and the original becomes more valuable based on how popular and how shared and culturally important it is. So so the same logic applies to digital art. If I can use my technology to prove that I have the original digital asset of a piece of art, for the love of God, please, everybody, Instagram it, tweet it, copy it a million times, because I have the original. That just makes my original more valuable.
Yeah. So it's very, I would even push it further, to be honest, because I would have answered that person, like, who said, like, why would I care? Like that people in the art market have been trusting galleries and artists, like photographers or video art artists, for decades to say, I swear I've done like 5, like it's an edition of 10 plus 1 AP, that's it. And who knows, you know, and probably a million artists who just said like, oh, well, I'm just going to make 5 more, like, you know, in this other market, like, and say the same thing. And for the first time, we have the artwork, the certificate of authenticity, and the currencies that allows the transaction on the same level, which is digital. And everything can be embedded and in the artwork that is digital as well, and proved. You know, like, this is the first time ever that we can actually have scarce, like, digital art. And I know scarcity doesn't make everything, but it is quite a big element and a big thing that never before could we make sure that we just did not copy and paste a JPEG and, you know, like, send it, or video as well. So.
Or again, please do copy paste it a million times, but we know what's the original. And in my mind, we're just communicating data in a different way. The second thing I hear from a lot of the incumbent art space about digital art is this all sounds really complicated of figuring out which one is the original. Fanny, you sent me like a 300-page book about digital art conservancy. You know, like, this is still a very
yes, I did. True story.
It's
plead guilty.
It's still very much a growing space. But again, I would argue that the NFT or the digital art, it's just a data endpoint. Just the same way that originally the certificate of authenticity was a data endpoint. What was the data? Some expert or relative of the artist is such an expert that they can say this is real or that's not real, or somebody kept a very well organized, or sometimes not well organized, archive of who owned what when a painter made something, who bought it and then sold it to whom. Um, just that was back in analog days where that was all just still data, and
Yeah.
the certificate of authenticity was that data endpoint that proved something. We're doing the exact same thing now, only we're doing it digitally, which means we're just joining the rest of the world digitizing.
But to be fair, I mean, it is not easy. Even you know, like sometimes when you look at the current platforms, it is not easy to understand, like what are the rules of the smart contract, like how do I check that like what is on the front end is actually like really what's on the immutable blockchain, because it does require a lot of trust in the current platforms. And I know it's the beginning, and this is kind of getting built as we speak, but I think this is where, you know, between the fascination that we in the crypto space have for the possibilities of the blockchain and this like immutable ledger, and the actual experience that people have with the front ends is still very disconnected. You know, it's still hard to like just really find a platform that like explain it first well to you, and you know, I just remember when I started like just trying to purchase my first CryptoPunk. I'm ashamed to say, but it took me like the entire afternoon to like be able to get Ether like on Coinbase, and then like figure out how MetaMask worked, and so on. And obviously it's better, a little bit better now, but it's still not like, you know, we're still not there yet.
So let me tell you about a platform that's launching in a month.
oh, where is that?
Look, I'd love to take this opportunity to just shill Blockparty and tell you about how great it is, but let me just go ahead and do that. I'd rather talk about exactly what you just described, that it is hard. And there are tons of platforms coming out, or incumbent platforms that are already here, that are run by smart people that are motivated to build great things. And I think that it's really wonderful what we have so far in the NFT space. It's not always the most user-friendly experience, but it's not awful either. I think oftentimes the user experience being negative is overstated. But the values that I bring into the marketplace that we're developing, the values that our CTO, Joey Fischello, brings to the marketplace, the values that our chief of product, Shiv Madan, bring into the marketplace, is that just as we learned in the music and sports worlds, is true for the art world as well. And we heard from the big tour promoters and venue owners and sports team owners. They helped us remember that nobody knows how to sell a music experience to the music fan better than some of like the big music promoters. Nobody knows how to sell a great sporting experience better than, the sports team. And what we've adopted as an ethos at Blockparty is to do no harm, right? So when we started coming at the promoters from music and started coming at the sports teams in 2018 with an NFT, the first thing they said was, look, we get blockchain, but do not make my customers go to Coinbase to buy an Ether to then come onto your platform and get a MetaMask, and they have to show the ticket. They were just like, no, don't get in our way of selling the experience to our audience. I think the same holds true for the art world. I want, and my team wants, to bring the benefit of blockchain to the art world. And again, the art world and the digital art space has been around before blockchain and doesn't necessarily need blockchain. Where blockchain could really make itself useful is to deliver this benefit of being making a digital file provably scarce. But in order for that to be usable to anybody, we have to do no harm. First and foremost, do no harm. Art is about collectorship. And it's about seeing a piece, you know you want to buy this piece, you know you want to own this piece, you have a connection with it, and you want to bring it into your collection. The process I just described should not be interfered with whatsoever. The minute I make Fanny go onto Coinbase, onto the MetaMask, onto all of these things, if I make you do that, then I run the risk of getting in the way of that bond that you've already forged with. It's still a young bond when you first fall in love with the piece. If I make imagine a relationship. If you make it super complicated in the first days of a relationship, it's not going to go anywhere. I think MetaMask, by the way, and decentralized wallets play an important role here. So on the Blockparty marketplace, the goal is that you get all the benefits of the blockchain, supporting the transactions on the marketplace. Anybody can upload digital art onto the Blockparty marketplace, not needing to know anything about NFTs. You don't have to go in there and launch NFT. You upload your digital art. Blockparty creates the NFT on the back end in an automated way. So all of the NFT transfer, the purchase, the wallet setup, this is all happening in the back end. And the user or the artist does not need to interact with the blockchain unless they explicitly click a button that says, I'm a blockchain person, down with central banking.
Show me the dirt.
Okay, let me get in there. And so once you've hopefully purchased some digital art, it's sitting there in your collection, which is to you a collection, but to us in the back end, it's your wallet. Hopefully once you've learned a little bit about NFTs, and hopefully once you've learned a little bit about why this all matters, it's up to you. But if you do, you're able to click a little button that says, I would like to control my private key. I want to jump into the multiverse of the blockchain. And at that point, we would encourage you to set up a decentralized wallet.
To take over pretty much. Like you're simplifying for the start, but then you allow them to take back ownership.
You got to crawl before you can run, Fanny.
I know, I'm like that. No, but it's. I have a million questions about this platform because I'm dying to see it. So I'm not gonna ask them all. But one thing that we've seen across platforms is a lot of the artists are worried about where does a smart contract lives, like how does it work with royalties? Like, can I actually sell something on your platform and then sell something somewhere else? Like, have you thought about it from the artist process as well?
Absolutely. And we're at the outset now where we want to make sure that what we do on the front end really does happen on the back end. So right now, there's a lot of ones and zeros, and it's a lot of building the user experience to match what I just described. And on initial launch, it will be really a handful of early art collections that are on the marketplace. And we'll announce those once the marketplace launches, but we're really excited about this controlled couple of collections where we know the owners, we know the artists, and it's all sort of pre-agreed. But now when we get from MVP to version 1 and we want to start inviting artists to upload and sell, at that point, we want to work with the artists to design something that is very artist first and equitable to the artists. The first thing that I will say, and that's part of our ethos, is we absolutely will have it enabled such that any artist can cross-list on Blockparty or whatever the art platform may end up being called. That's still something that I'm eager to announce next month. But we're we don't expect any artist to get exclusive with us off the bat, and nor do we want to get exclusive with any artist. So off the bat, we would promote artists cross-listing on our marketplace as well as the others that are in the space.
So it's very that kind of brings me to a question I'm actually asking myself all the time is, on one end, I'm very excited about this like new community and kind of like the creation of this new art movement that is a crypto art. You know, it's not that many platforms. It's handful of artists who actually support and sell their works to other artists and vice versa. And it's great, right? Like we should not rush things. Like we're working on things, and this like kind of like this. I mean, when do you remember like witnessing like the birth of a new art movement? Like that was my first one personally. So this kind of like this like cherishing like this like growth of this like small thing, and the obvious need for more participants, more investors, more like artists, and make it more mainstream and open it to other digital artists who might not be familiar with blockchain. So I'm wondering how you maybe personally also approach this, because I'm torn. It's kind of like I have like a like split personality. Like one day I'm like, oh, we need more people, and one day I'm like, oh no, this is great, I can find something so cheap like from like, and it's gonna be so like great. Anyway,
I mean, that's you've just described like decades and decades of art collectorship in like one microcosm of a new movement, which is awesome. I guess, wow, that's a really good thought, and I think that that's a very natural and human way to feel, right? Mm-hmm. This is a very new and budding space with super talented artists that are blowing up, that are just years away from getting mainstream. And it's really cool that we have legitimate pieces from them at what's the opposite of an eye-popping price, like it's so cool. And like the community is very small and tight-knit, so you're seeing this very organic like artists interacting with other artists and like building like a scene. And the art dealer in me wants to be like, well, Calder mobiles weren't always $10 million. Like in the 50s and 60s, if you were like a cool New Yorker, you could like hang out with Calder and like buy some of the stuff for like not that much money. Yeah. Like I wonder if we're having that moment right now where 40, 50 years from now, people are going to be asking us like, oh my God, like you were around, like I can't believe a Hackatow was like $200, like it's, but I don't want to get ahead of myself. Right, obviously,
obviously. I mean, we don't know we don't have a crystal ball to predict who is going to be successful, right? But
I think it's very cool to be at this early and organic stage, and I want to say it's a very human thing to at the same time want to see this thing blow up into being a huge thing, while also being protective of this like cool organic experience. I mean, have you ever like loved a band before they blew up? Or, how about all the super jaded crypto traders that are like 50% drop in one day, back in my day 5 years ago.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's very much, I think one thing that I'm very happy about personally is that we're a little bit out of the hype where like everything was gonna be, blockchain was gonna revolutionize like the traditional art market, and like everything was gonna be blockchain and so on. And I think like still a little bit like the wild west, but I think we passed a little bit the hype. And I'm personally very happy to focus on digital assets because and that's a very personal opinion, but this is like for me where there's the most potential of growth and development, more than blockchain optimizing the art market. Like, guess what? The art market has been working pretty well for centuries.
It is. I think about this all the time now as we get closer to launch, and I talk to investors and I talk to early customers, some of the early artists we want in the marketplace. I think about this a lot, and I think about the newness of what we're building now really highlights just how ancient the art world is. And that's why where we started this conversation, you and I joke around about this. Like, it's funny when people say the art market's inefficient. It's been around for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years. It's like a very, very mature and developed market. So I think that the victories, the blockchain community can't go into the art industry the way it did into the financial industry in 2017. Mm-hmm. Right? I remember I was around in 2017 at all those conferences where, you know, Bitcoin was like pumping to $18,000 and everybody was like, down with banks. And but also, you know, dumping their coins and cashing out and using the banks, and then the price collapsed, and then it's like, oh wait, no, the banks are building their blockchains, and it was all a mess. The art world has been just fine. The blockchain world can come in, and I think it's already had great victories. And as long as the blockchain builders for the art space continue to focus on getting these defined little victories and just growing them organically, instead of saying like, we're taking over the art business.
Yeah. No more galleries, no more institutions. And like,
I'll bring up the Yves Sussman project at Snark Art again. That, in my opinion, the reason I left that first meeting so impressed was that, to me, felt like a real victory for blockchain in the space, and the blockchain builders added some value into the space. Why? This award-winning piece by Yves Sussman has 10 copies. You can't own a copy. They're owned by museums. They're owned by long-term collections. The average person, no matter how much money they have, can't get one of these pieces, can't own it, can't collect it. Suddenly, we took an artist proof, and now, anyway, like a month after that experience, I had 10 Yves Sussman atoms. And I'm like, whoa, I don't own a whole thing, but I legit have a piece of greatness. And I've collected that as an art collector. That felt really good. That felt really special. And as long as everyone building in this space and Blockparty is committed to this, as long as we can all continue scoring these organic victories where we add value to the space, here's what's going to happen. That $400 billion collectibles marketplace market size that I mentioned earlier, digital assets aren't going to cannibalize it, but digital assets might add the next 100 billion, from 400 to 500 billion. And I think that's totally realistic in the next 15 to 20 years. Yeah. And if that happens, then I would encourage every investor in the space, every collector, to start showing up to CADAF and to start learning, because you're going to want to be a part of this explosive growth. Where else in the art business, in the collectibles business, can you expect that kind of parabolic growth? It's not the only thing that comes close to that, I suppose, at this point, is traditional contemporary art. And this may be the next phase of that explosive growth. So bring it full circle, brilliant to change crypto and digital art fair into contemporary digital art fair, because this is really the next step of contemporary.
I mean, I think this is a true thing, and you know, we thought about like the term digital art a lot, and and you know, the same way you've had like a lot of small niche segments in the art market kind of disappear with this catch-all contemporary art. Like for example, you don't have any video art department in any auction house. Like it's part of the contemporary art market. And with digital art, like there is a risk that like this becomes a small thing, like, you know, like next to the big contemporary art. But for us, like we saw it, like we almost like also like did not name it like digital art, but like the new contemporary art market. Because if you think about it, we've been in this contemporary art market for like, you know, since the 60s. So I think it's time that we actually enter the 21st century and acknowledge that every other industry has gone digital, and that many artists, even the painters, like if you go to a school, like an art school, students sketch on their tablets. So they technically go from digital to the canvas, which is very interesting. And it's definitely not an overnight thing. So I think we get a lot of, you know, we get very excited, but it's going to take time. It's going to take time. And, but we're going to get there.
I'm very excited about that. What you just said, it brings me back to where I was 12 years ago, thinking about supply, demand, the financials, the market around the trade around art. This is what I got into the art world for. And now I'm so filled with gratitude that I get to be leading Blockparty in a direction that speaks to what you just, to that marketplace, because there's no right answer about what's going to drive the going of mainstream for digital art. Is it going to be collectors demanding it? Well, eventually we need collectors to demand it, but collectors don't know to demand it until the artists create beautiful artwork. So
yeah, you don't know what you don't know.
Huh? You don't know what you don't know. But then you have Cause, you know, making AR sculptures and hiding them all over Paris. How cool is that? And that's going to make people that pay attention to the traditional, well, I shouldn't say traditional, but to the big contemporary market of like, wait, Cause is doing what? And then the other thing that you said about the art school kids drawing on tablets, well, art school kids need a job before they become famous artists. It's graphic design, oftentimes for paying clients, which are big brands. So the more things change, the more they stay the same, right? Like, where did Warhol get a start? He was a graphic artist for bigger brands. You know, how do you get, you know, and then how do you think we got to the Warhols we know today? So if you have art school kids learning how to create art on tablets by digital means, and in an increasingly digital world, they maybe get some graphic design jobs in the digital space, but then really take digital art seriously. Maybe we get the next Warhol in digital by the same path we got the original Warhol. Maybe. In any event, it just goes to show how wildly early it is in this space. It feels like everyone is launching a platform, launching NFT. It feels like there's a lot of digital art out there, but
this is great. This is great. You know,
it feels like there's I'll repeat the metaphor. It feels like digital art is having it's like iPad or Kindle moment that the ebooks had, like I mentioned earlier.
And again, I think to build a market, you need the Yves Sussman, you need the new kids on the block, like at art schools. You need many platforms. Like, nobody's in competition. There is so much space, like, for that market to be built. And this is why I never regretted, like, you know, leaving my job at like more traditional art players, because, you know, it's still a small market, like the traditional art market. So it's like you fight for a little piece of the pie. And what I keep saying, like right now, like with digital art, we're baking a new cake. So make the cake as big as possible. Like, you know, like everybody can have like a big piece, and we don't even know the size of the cake, you know, the giant cake.
Well, everybody's adding to the cake and we'll see how big it gets until it collapses on itself. I
I
think
think we should dig this analogy more, like, and add layers, and like, it's like I'm sure this like well.
I definitely want to own the frosting vertical.
Come on, this is the best one. I want the cherry then.
I'm gonna keep sending CADAF compliments. I think the third piece between collectors and artists in this space is the curators and the gallerists, the dealers in the space need to continue promoting, finding the best artists, showing them. I think CADAF provides such a wonderful platform, and so many people had their first digital art experience last March in New York. And you and CADAF have found a really great meeting point of a commercial sort of art fair to go and experience art and collect it, but also to learn what it's all about. So I think a lot of people left the first event in March being like, oh man, this is great. And when you guys moved to a bigger space in December during Art Basel, how much bigger was that space than the Lightbox? Right?
Much bigger.
We had this massive warehouse at Mana, and what was really wonderful was to see the gallerists, the curators that are in the space, doing wonderful things by showcasing some of the best in a way that's very accessible, but also let me try to phrase this the right way. Very accessible, but also befitting the bespoke and high-end environment that fine art demands. So it's I think we're all to continue the metaphor further, we're all trying to bake this cake, but we need somewhere to enjoy it and somewhere to learn about it, and I think CADAF makes for a great bakery.
Oh, this is great. I always wanted to be a baker, so this is perfect.
It would appeal to your ridiculous nature.
Well, this is great. I think this is I mean, we could talk for hours. We talk for hours actually, like on this subject. So we'll definitely talk more and follow what's happening and keep baking the cake. Many more cakes.
Thank you so much, Fanny, and everyone that's tuned in. Thank you for your time, for taking part and joining into mine and Fanny's inside jokes. Hopefully, it was fun for everybody. But everybody, I would love for everybody to come meet some of the Blockparty team. We're gonna be around all weekend in our virtual booth, and while we're still keeping this thing pretty under wraps until August 1st, which is about when we expect to really unleash it on the world, we're excited to talk about it. Come meet the team, come get a sense of our passion for what we're doing and what we hope to add to this cake.
We sensed it, so I hope you get a lot of feedback and visits. I'll definitely stop by, like, it'll be on the weekend, so this is to be expected. So thank you again, Vlad, and cheers to NFTs and to the cake.
Yes, thank you, Fanny.
Cheers.